Would you state your name, please? State your name, thanks.
Laura Lehman, and I'm from Meadowbrook. And I think what we need here, you know that I asked to have documents actually included for this meeting. Okay, I know we don't need to discuss that. We didn't get them. Okay, but that all of the people in the township coming in new to this don't know it. So let me sort of summarize what that thing was. And is it okay if do I met you up?
Your 3 minutes have started.
Face these people? Okay, so I'm doing this for their benefit. These are not my
Sorry?
comments, but just quickly, there was a map, okay, that was created. And the intent was to try and create more affordable units in the township. And also to allow for a whole lot more units for people to come into the township, because we had an apparent population boom coming and we needed to build these units for these people that were coming. Okay, so two things were happening. The affordable units were going to come from drawing half-mile circles around our trains and quarter-mile circles around our shopping centers. And also on the shopping center parking lots themselves, just like Preet at the Willow Grove Mall tried to do, they wanted to allow apartment buildings to be built. Mr. Thompson will correct me if I get anything wrong, okay? And so those were the three main parts of, there was so much else in the plan, but for the land use, those were the three main parts. They published a map with the circles around the trains and the shopping centers, and people couldn't see where their houses were because they're not familiar with that map. I work with it all the time. You can't find my house half the time. Okay. So I asked them to put it on a GIS map where you type in your address and it shows you. They wouldn't do that. Okay. They wouldn't tape it. They wouldn't show in any way. They wouldn't have question answer sessions. They wouldn't tape these kinds of sessions and put them on the channel so that people knew. In every way, they withheld the information, just like they withheld the information so that you are confused tonight. Okay, and we need to stop that. This has to change in this township. So basically, to do the land use now, he's saying it's a wide open slate, and all you people who don't know what he's talking about just get to say whatever comes to mind. And that's not a good way to plan the township. Okay, so the question is, number one, do we need more units? No, I can tell you in detail, but I can't in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I can tell you how they reached that population number. And Mr. Thompson will admit, I think that they finally agreed that those numbers were not correct. The numbers that they had were different on different pages. And when we looked into it and found out where they came from, they're not correct. So let me tell you where they came from. I see you shaking your head. Do you want to fill in here?
Let's use that as a great starting point.
Well, let me just tell them where the
You
numbers.
got 1 minute.
Because it's
1 minute.
Okay, because
and then
it's
we'll-
really important.
right? Okay.
Where the population numbers came from that were so important were basically, and I went to DVRPC, who does the numbers, to find this out. Okay, number one, people who have land that isn't developed yet. So you have a lot you can put a house on, that's one. Okay, and so all the undeveloped land. Okay, so nobody's going to develop all that land all of a sudden, all at once, but all of that, whatever they could figure out, got counted. Number two, we have things in the pipeline. There are 244 units coming to Baderwood, already theoretically approved. And so the next thing was what's in the pipeline. Okay, and number three was, let me think, help me out. Number three was, the migration. Okay, the magic migration. There was a map called the TAS map, Transition Access Zones. It's a TAS map. So it's people transitioning to certain zones in our township. I said, well, how does that happen? Well, of course, you build 244 units at Baderwood, people are going to migrate there. Okay, so that's a migration.
That's a really good overview.
Okay.
And if I could just say, there's certain questions that you have about the basis for making decisions, right? The data, you're questioning, you're going all the way back to the data. And then decisions after that. So valid comment. Right. What we're trying to do is really get the core questions down. And you just gave us 3. Okay. So who's next? Sir. Please come up and just state your name.
Hello, everybody. Good evening, everybody. My name is George Salona. My wife and I just moved into Abington last year from South Philadelphia, which has become a nightmare. Having read the plan, we have major concerns about Chapter 13. Abington is 97% developed, maybe more. Any new housing adds to an already too dense housing inventory. Page 22 of the future land use plan is really disturbing to me. It states Abington will develop zoning incentivizing developers to make a portion of new housing development available to households with moderate incomes or lower. This is disturbing on a lot of levels. It's vague. No explanation of how eligibility will be determined. No mention of whether Abington already meets the required affordable housing standards. My understanding is that it does, but I can't give you the official source. What will be the incentives for the developers who get tax abatements while the rest of us have to pay taxes to support this? Who decides these incentives? Who decides the standards for prospective tenants? Will the residents' concerns be respected and addressed? From what I'm seeing tonight, I have doubts. Will the decision-making process be transparent? I really have doubts. Under such land use plans, Section 8 housing would expand significantly in number. Landlords who have no allegiance to the Abington community's well-being or quality of life. Large apartments would have to be developed and include Section 8 tenants. These complexes not only replace a shrinking supply of open space, they require an increase in township services, police, fire, refuse collection, etc. Tax increases. Utilities such as water, electric, gas will need to be expanded. Prices will rise. Demand exceeds supply, simple economic formula. There would certainly be rising criminal activity, theft, carjacking, vandalism, and worse. We just came from South Philadelphia, as I told you. The rise in criminal activity is scary to the point that I left a place I never thought I would leave. Traffic congestion is already a problem on 611. This will make it worse. Furthermore, with respect to this gentleman, I understand a consulting group from North Carolina is making the recommendations in this planning. I object to a group that is so far removed to this locale having such enormous power in planning Abington's future. We don't know what the methodology is. We don't know the expertise and background. We don't know if they can understand the complexities and nuances of this township.
That's a really good list of things. And in 3 minutes, you hit a lot. Would you be willing to send that to the township so we can have that?
Yes, I have more. Unfortunately, I guess my 3 minutes are up.
And when other people get a chance, then
Sure.
then come back, okay?
I wanted to be around the hospital.
Thank you. Do you want to speak? Do you want to, who wants to speak, please? That's what we're here for.
Please understand, the 3 minutes, 3 minutes is to make sure that everyone has a chance. That's not to say you won't have more time after.
Yes, ma'am. Your seats up front. Hi, what's your name, please?
Lisa Mallon from Meadowbrook. I actually started out with chapter 7, which talks about Abington has about 80% of the township's occupied housing is owner occupied. And high ownership rates are typically associated with neighborhood stability and a high level of home and property maintenance. So this is the reason I think people chose Abington or were born and raised here in Abington and decided to stay here in Abington because of the high home ownership
Mhm.
and the affordability. And then when we switch over to chapter 13, the land is actually 98% developed here. So to do any other development, you're going to have to redo it in other places. And identified in this plan, and instead of me flipping through my iPad, because I pretty much know these numbers, there are already somewhat approved plans that somebody mentioned, the 244 apartments in Baderwood. But there's also in the possible future plans, another 297 apartments in Noble. They call it Noble, but it's by the Walgreens. So that would be over 500 apartments on the Fairway. If anybody rides on the Fairway now or tries to get in and out for Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or any of the great shops up there, it's already a nightmare on those days. Or if you're coming down 611 and want to make that left on the Fairway and the light leaves 2 cars through to make that left from 611 to the Fairway. Or if you're coming down Susquehanna Road from 611 down to Valley Road, certain times during the day, you might be backed up on Susquehanna Road up to Sewell Lane or even up to Huntington Road. So then if you add to that the potential of 663 apartments in the parking lot of Target of Town Center, on top of the 500, I just don't know when it stops. And I happen to be running for commissioner in Abington. And this is exactly why I'm running for commissioner in Abington. This is not right that we don't share this information more publicly and way ahead of schedule. At the beginning of this meeting, I know I heard that the commissioners haven't seen this comprehensive plan because it's still in draft. Well, I'm telling you, if I'm seeing it on the website, they better have read it and they better know it inside out and what they're selling. During the primary election, I specifically asked Commissioner Hecker and Commissioner Spiegelman, why do you want to densify Abington? Commissioner Spiegelman looked me straight in the eye and said, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't seen any of that data. And we sent it to him. We sent it to him on I think it was an email link. It was actually my best friend who was up there with me doing it. And then Commissioner Hecker said he's totally against the densifying of Abington. Well, if you're against the densifying of Abington, then take these apartment buildings out of the plan. Why do they need to be in the plan if the commissioners don't think that that's what should be in the plan?
Okay,
We don't have enough
You-
hospital beds. We don't have enough
your
school spaces.
your points about the densification and the increase in population and its effect on the traffic,
Every service.
right?
We don't have enough hospital beds.
Okay.
Even if we have a bed, we don't have a nurse, and everybody knows that.
Noted. Do you,
I'm-
if you have anything you want to write down and send, please do that. Okay, thank you. Who's next? Please, everybody's here. You probably have something to say. Sir, it's going to be everybody gets a chance to speak first, and then we'll go around again. We are. We are. That's what I said in the beginning. But it's better to have the direct communication. Sir, if you state your name.
Sure. Hi, I'm Richard Veith. I live in
Sure.
Overlook. I live in Overlook area. I moved into the township about 5 years ago. I selected this area. My parents live over in Springfield Township. I moved out of New York City and I wanted to have a family. So I started raising a son 4 years ago. And I selected this area for its schools and for its open space and for its proximity to the city, but yet at the same time, a completely different world. And while there are, parts of our township that are in decline and do need to be reinvented. So I think, we have to acknowledge that. Down the road from me on 611, it's a pretty, unfortunate zone where we've lost one of the big box stores. I'm talking about the Crestmont overlook zone of 611. So development is important. But what I find abhorrent is the idea that we want to transform our township into a denser, more types of housing types, to invite more types of economic people into the township. I picked this place for the schools. Schools are excellent because these are single family homeowners, mostly paying a lot of taxes to support the system. If we start diluting that, we're going to either have to pay more or the quality of our schools is going to substantially be affected. And I don't want that for my 4-year-old son. So I see a balance in this room of people that do see areas where we do need development. We do need to reinvent some places in our township that are not succeeding. But on the other hand, we do not need a massive influx of housing unit types and people, in my opinion. Thank you.
May I just ask you clarification? You say it's density and diversity of unit types
Yes.
that you think are not warranted.
Yes, because
Okay.
it's a single family basis of this community that supports the systems.
Just want to be
And
clear.
more people mean more services, which
Right.
the roads can't support
Okay,
all the infrastructure. And
thank you. Folks, sir.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Brock. I've been living here for a few years now. I guess I do have a slightly different attitude towards some of this kind of development than maybe some other people do. Maybe people are not going to like it as much. Personally, I mean, I don't mind actually as much more people coming in, or even places where development is increasing. But the thing that sort of bothers me about it and about what I have seen with the plan before, and I think that maybe a lot of people also feel, sort of underpins a lot of what other people feel, is that there does not seem to be a specific purpose to some of the ideas here, and there doesn't appear to be any kind of functional accountability structure to ensure that that purpose is enacted. I mean, I know somebody talked, I read somebody was talking about parking garages, for example, and I think this is a great example. In order to improve the community, you are almost always better off reducing the footprint available to cars. I know that it sounds crazy, but when you increase the amount of space available for cars, you get something called induced demand. People use their cars more and it makes traffic worse. And that actually often when you narrow the amount of space available to cars, people use their cars less. They find other modes of transportation, and combined with a system of public transportation, like paths and pedestrian paths and, trolleys or something like that, you can actually vastly reduce the amount of traffic while also reducing the amount of footprint and giving more space to people who, to actual human beings that live in the area. We want open space. We want to live in spaces. We want to have space available to us. So parking garages, if you were using them to reduce the footprint of parking, could be great. There are plenty of places that take advantage of keeping all of their parking outside of the town proper. There are, it's true. There are places that do that. If you're using it to increase capacity while also only slightly increasing the footprint, or if you're using it to keep the footprint the same while also increasing capacity, those things are not as good. They're not actually benefiting the community. And it's not clear at all where or how that is going to be used. If all that's going to happen is that the township is just going to take these spaces and auction them off to developers who, in my experience, and maybe the experience of the people here, only ever do the cheapest and most garbage job that they can with whatever space that they have, then what you have is really a dereliction of the responsibility of these commissions. This is not necessarily, I don't think that any of the ideas in the plan are necessarily bad. But without any kind of structure about how these things are going to be maintained and how services are going to be provided and what the actual vision for this space is and what that accountability structure is, this ends up looking like a smorgasbord for Toll Brothers. And I don't think that that's what most people want. I may be sorry if I'm speaking for people here, and I don't mean to do that, but I think that a lot of the anxieties that underpin specific issues maybe are also related to this larger structural issue.
That's very interesting. I hear that you're trying to balance ideas in general, and maybe, for instance, if parking is going to be increased by reducing the footprint, which would be a structure, then what's the newly gained area going to be used for? That, I think, is the essence of your question, if I'm hearing it right.
Well, I mean, that is, and what
Right.
is the mechanism by which we ensure that it's developed appropriately? I mean,
Yeah.
I understand that everybody's concerned about there's gonna be more people and that's gonna mean higher taxes, but if you expand, for example, the economic base in the town,
Mhm.
right? If you took, I don't know, if you went to Target, the town center Target, and you mushed all the parking together into a big parking garage, oh, no, I know, but hear me out. You'd have a whole bunch of extra space that you could turn into small shops, which would in turn generate tons of tax revenue. You would not have lost any parking space. We have a higher building. I mean, and nobody lives around there anyway. In the Target, you see the Target.
All right, let's not make this a single conversation. If you would
But you're
finish up.
talking about a building, you're talking about, again, you're talking about a building that is not higher than the existing
Right.
buildings. You could, for example, so maybe that's a bad example. There are other places where you could do that and you could create this other space that could be used for people.
I think you raised a central question. And I think I paraphrased it well, but if you'd like to put it in writing too, so that.
I would just like to add that again, that the central question is not just the balance, but what, again, is the accountability structure for making sure that that balance is maintained.
I have unclear specifics and no accountability structure.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear, what is your thinking? Or what would you consider?
Why don't I come back for?
That's, yeah, if you would, that would.
Yeah.
Right.
You're all thinking.
Thank you for the statement, and we're gonna look forward to your follow-up. Who's next? If anyone who hasn't spoken that wants to, please just come on up. Thank you. And your name? In the,
I live in Glenside. I don't,
okay,
and some of the things I have some questions. That's why I came tonight for questions.
so let me,
Appreciate
let
you.
me say that we want you to ask them. We're probably not going to be able to answer them tonight, but maybe we'll start by asking them.
I appreciate that. One of the questions I had is the comp plan that is in place now that I've read over, is that being scrapped? Are we starting over? What are we doing with that?
We didn't bring that comp plan here tonight
Okay,
because that's
Well,
not,
piece of it.
that's not the
Right.
way it's moving forward.
okay,
There's been a couple steps back to add public meetings, to bring in public comment, to bring in new team
okay,
members,
okay,
and start by listening again.
great.
So,
Part of the plan, and I understand this is very popular,
Hmm.
is to have little town centers around train stations, walkable, 15-minute cities, I think they call them.
right,
And that's what I gleaned out of some of the things I was reading,
yeah.
is that we want to look to see more density around the train stations,
Mhm.
density apartments, shops, which is very nice and all a wonderful idea. I'm not sure it's right for where we are.
Yeah.
Glenside, where I live, I'm a half a mile from RG train station, a half a mile from Glenside. And I know some of my friends are a half a mile from Roslyn.
train
Is that a
station.
question or is this a statement?
Statement.
You're trying to.
So that's my
All right,
question,
okay.
is that going to be, is that still part of what we're looking to do? Is
Okay,
that something we
I
will?
I can give you in general answer in that this town is like transit rich beyond any
I agree.
town, right? So that's a real asset that most municipalities don't have that level of transit. The general idea of developing around transit is a good one for a lot of reasons, but it can't be just uniform. Especially in places where there's already existing neighborhoods and fabric. So the idea of walkability to a train station is a general way to describe how can people use this without having a car. So that's why you see shapes like a quarter mile or a half mile. Those are guides, right? But what Abington also has in its, let's call it its little villages, right? The existing little villages that kind of grew up around the transit. It already has that structure and it grew up for a reason. So how do you carefully plan those areas for the future so that you keep the best of that, but plan for inevitable changes? We all know everything changes, keeps changing. The comprehensive plan is to try to get a strategy that makes sense in general, right? And so the idea of drawing a radius around a train station is very generalized. And it's something that, you know, on first glance, Abington already has that. It has the walkability around the train stations, right?
Thank you.
So on one side of the tracks, it might be single family homes. On the other side of the tracks, it might be mixed use commercial, right? So I don't think that and I don't know too much about the history of this yet, but I don't think the intent was to ever to make one side of the tracks homogeneous with the other. Okay. The
Okay.
circle may have implied that, but I don't see that as being a direction. And so I hope that answers your question in general.
It does.
Okay.
It does. But my understanding, and maybe Mr. Manfredi can answer this, is there's some funding available from state and federal guidelines for developing around train stations. Is that true?
I can,
I have
I,
Mr. Manfredi.
oh, sure. Go ahead. Yep.
There is funding available for a number of projects, that as well as others.
What other ones are available?
Well, we're
Projects.
going after multimodal and other PennDOT and Department of Community and Economic Development for example, the Abington Jenkintown Connection Project, where we're looking to put sidewalks and stormwater in.
Right.
There are projects we're looking at with the Army Corps of Engineers for enhancing environmental controls at Rochester Park. We have a very active grants program,
Right.
and we pursue grants to offset taxpayer costs at every turn.
Good.
So there are a number of grants.
I guess I'm specifically asking about the grants for developing in areas. I understand the grants are available for environmental issues and environmental controls and also for, infrastructure.
Mhm.
I get that. I guess I'm looking for money that's available.
It
to
depends.
Can I ask you,
Sure.
and then we're almost done, but these are good. Money that's available for development.
Mhm.
Okay, that's tougher because the private sector mostly does the development. Now, if there's public infrastructure that's needed anyway, like flooded areas that flood
I understand all that
Or-
and that you're,
or
That's not
sidewalks,
my
then
question
you
at
can
this
start
point.
to bring in public dollars,
Right.
right?
I understand that.
That's the best answer we can give right now. What
Okay.
Mr. Manfredi offered is pretty detailed in a way to approach it. One other way you can look is on June 1st, go to the open space and rec plan. We have a section on funding
Mhm.
those parts.
That's fine. I have no problems with that part of
Okay.
it. I have one more question.
Go ahead.
please. If we're putting this on hold, the future land development on hold, will that delay the vote for your Economic Development Corporation?
First of all, I want to say the
That's
reason.
all I have.
I'm
I'll
gonna answer it. I want to thank you all, because this is precisely why we're here tonight. So you can have an opportunity to ask, and we can have an opportunity to answer. The specific answer to that question is, will it put the economic development plan on hold? Is no. This is separate from, the comprehensive plan is separate from the economic development plan. The approach that the board has taken is a strategic approach. And there are a number of plans that all tie together that are running simultaneously so that all things are considered. The gentleman mentioned a firm from North Carolina. The firm from North Carolina is actually a firm that is working on the strategic plan, not the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan that we have to date was done by residents who are citizen volunteers, our planner from the county, and we've added the expertise of Simone Collins because of their knowledge of the township and their expertise in this. What was put on hold was the future land use chapter, any future work. The map that we're all talking about that was pointed out, and Ms. Lehman was one of the people who was speaking the loudest to this, was put on hold because of all the comments from the public. That's what was on hold. The chapter, the work of that chapter was put on hold until we can get to this point and have the public input. We brought in Mr. Collins as a team member to work with Mr. Narkowicz and develop recommendations for the Board of Commissioners. Is there any part of those questions? Although one other thing that I heard earlier was about documents being available. And what my answer was, you asked if that would be put on hold, and the answer is no, because it's on a separate path. That's not tied to this comprehensive plan. It's a separate plan. It's different development. This is addressing different development than that development. The discussions we're having today on development about the train stations and is more toward land development, like residential, some of the comments on residential apartments and things of that nature. The economic development study and plan is specific to what can we do to develop business opportunities. Now, I will say this, is it possible to tie economic development, comprehensive plan together? Absolutely. You have to have them all together, but they're separate plans running parallel. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you. Frank. Yeah. Okay, I see most people have not come up and spoken yet. Who's the next person? Yes, ma'am. Hi, your name, please.
My name is Peg Connors. I live on Guernsey Avenue, the other side of York Road. I'm one of Chris's neighbors. Hey, Chris. We have one of the oldest streets in Abington. My house was built in the early 1900s.
Okay.
We didn't have driveways. And unfortunately, cars have taken over our street, which is fine, and everybody is used to it. What I don't understand is, where are all these people on a train going to be going? I work in Bluebell, which is 10 miles away. I can't get there unless I drive a car.
Right.
So where are all the people in this area of trains going? They're not going to South Philly, or to George, right? Where are they going? And what are we solving with these units being built around a train
Okay,
station?
it's not, you're not asking a rhetorical question. You're asking a real question,
Yeah.
which I can't give you an answer tonight. But what I can tell you is something most people probably already know, is that it was the system developed as a radial system, right? And all lines went into Philadelphia,
Uh-huh.
right?
And that doesn't happen anymore.
I won't say that it doesn't happen, and I can't say that it's happening at the same volume it used to. But what we have is a lot of people trying to figure out it's a valuable thing, right? And if more people could use it, it would be even better. So
But they have to go somewhere.
It
I
go-
can't get to Bluebell on the train. I'd have to take a bus to Plymouth Meeting Mall. It would take me 3 hours to commute each way.
You
I
know,
would love it if I didn't have to drive.
the idea that you're saying, I'd try to define it that it doesn't go to the place that you want to go. And probably those radial systems don't go to a lot of places people want to go. Back in 20 years ago, there was a look at, could we get a train line, a passenger line to go across the counties, right? Because none of the old routes go that way.
Mhm.
It's hard to do.
It's very hard.
Right.
Yes.
So what's happening now is SEPTA's realizing that, you know, the bus routes they're hard to use. They're trying to do what they can do, work with communities who want to help increase ridership. But SEPTA's starting to look at some kinds of on-demand bus service, and it's just beginning. They're looking in zones.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's the kind of answer you want, but I can't tell you, you know, how to get to Bluebell. I commute across 2 counties.
Yeah.
All right, my office is in Norristown, and all I have to
It's
do
a
is get on
hard
202 and I'm the
Yeah,
whole way, right?
yeah.
I wish there was a train, because the train station's a block from my office.
Right. Well, and the other thing I'll say is I grew up actually in New York City. I didn't have a car until I got
So
married.
you
and
know.
moved. But I also lived for 10 years in Phoenix, Arizona.
Right.
Where if you didn't have a car, you weren't going anywhere. And they put in a light rail.
Right,
That was supposed to take you from the airport to Scottsdale, Tempe, wherever you wanted to go. It doesn't work. Nobody takes it. It doesn't go anywhere.
Hmm.
So I'm just concerned that we're thinking about what to do in our little area, but I also want to understand where you think people are going. The
okay,
other part of this is you take your life in your hands. From my house, if I walk down to Whole Foods, you do, the traffic is awful. The amount of cars that go up and down 611 when I'm trying to get out of my street, I can sit there for 5 minutes. People take a shortcut down my street because Susquehanna is too busy. I don't understand how we're going to bring more people in with the road system
So-
that we have in
so
place today.
and just to close your thoughts, it's the volumes of traffic that you're having trouble with.
It's the
And
number of cars all day long, not just rush hour.
yeah, sometimes we call that volumes, but it's
Okay.
number of cars.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all,
Your name, please.
my name is Adele.
Yeah,
Can you hear me? Adele?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's good.
I have a number of concerns that I have addressed publicly here before. First of all, Raymore and Flanagan section there that they're trying to put apartments in is filled with rats.
Okay,
And I'm certain of it because I go through that a lot, taking photos to show. Now, that hasn't been cleared up in over a year, and everyone knows that that's been used as a dump. Raymore and Flanagan has no maintenance service whatsoever, and they dump on the neighbor property. And building there will leave people with a problem with actually rodents to begin with. And it is extremely high volume there to begin with. And I went and I checked this bike path that they all wanted to, well, Mr. Abel wanted to put in, and they did. The bike path that we have there goes nowhere and gets to nothing. It ends in the street, and then it tells you not to go to Whole Foods in that area. It says bike path ends. But meanwhile, there are bikes drawn on the street leading up to Whole Foods. There have been road rage incidents that were highly publicized here. One just this winter, one last winter, that were horrible. It's not safe for biking. And these grates, I would call, they're sewer gutters that go out many, many feet. There's at least 15 of them on the ride. And I watched the bikers going like it's an obstacle course.
Mhm.
It is not a family-friendly place there. It is dangerous to have a bike path there. Building there, there's going to be rats to begin with that have to be coped with. And the idea of putting a playground in a train area, no one I've ever spoken to thinks that's safe.
Mhm.
A train area next to a playground doesn't work for children.
Okay,
Especially when you start with these apartments we're getting, they're opening up into the street. There are no playgrounds being provided by these developers. Instead, they're relying on the township to build a little playground next to a train station. And this bike path that is going to give the people a feeling as if this is a suburban lifestyle they're going to move into will not work for families.
So
It's
I
being
heard,
introduced in a way that's fraudulent. It's promising a safe environment to families. It's not here. It's not a clean area where they're building. We're reduced to open spaces in Abington that have garbage all over them.
okay,
We do not even have a maintained main street. We have restaurants where I live, that like the District Taco. For 2 years, I've been asking, can they close their dumpster? The answer has been no, they're not closing their dumpster. Clean the Raymore and Flanagan dump site. The answer has been, we're working on it. We have so many issues, and also Abington's Old York Road would be walkable. But Abington Township does not enforce ordinances. There are so many areas on the main strip here that are not walkable at all. And no one is even making any of these businesses, commercial businesses, fix a area where people walk. It's a very public area and would make this area more walkable to
okay.
begin with. And we have
We have
people who have to pay for it and they're not doing it.
I'm gonna take a minute to try to sum these things up, because you clearly have seen a lot of problems, and I want to
And
make
they
sure
haven't been addressed. And I also had a petition. We do not want.
what I'm going to try to do
Finish
now,
something,
because the
sir.
3 minutes is up, is
What they
try.
want, no.
is-
I don't want, this
Is
is.
try to take your ideas,
It will
and
take me
put them
one
in-
moment to say this.
put them into
I have a
the
petition
future
with
land
7
use categories,
I'm not
which is
getting to
why
say
we're
my
here
idea.
tonight, right?
I want
So-
to say something that I've spent a lot of time on. I had 735 people sign a petition that they want Abington to pursue maintenance, basic maintenance needs here, rather than further land development or what they call community development.
Right.
We don't want anyone to touch the zoning near our homes. And that is a plan that you have here, is to make it available if necessary in this comprehensive plan to change zoning as you need to.
Okay,
We don't want an
I'm
apartment building
getting,
anymore.
thank you, and I'm
It
getting
is
the
filled with
idea,
rat
and
area
the last
nearby.
idea is the closest thing that I've heard to why we're here tonight, which is the future land use, and so
Abuse.
there's maintenance issues that I'm sure are issues, right? But that's not specifically future land use. So for
Well, these
tonight,
apartments aren't gonna work.
tonight, what I'm hearing is that the development that was the development strategies that came out in the draft, you don't favor for a number of reasons.
Yes,
And
we're having trouble with the
and-
apartment buildings we have.
and
They're not
the,
being maintained.
right, let me just finish and then we're gonna move on. And the infrastructure, such as bike trails or sidewalks or parks, are not maintained, and
No, you don't need, first of all, I've been a teacher for over 33 years and you don't need to constantly summarize what I say. That's very clear.
I do,
They're putting bike paths
uh,
already
I
where
need to
it's not safe.
try. I need to try. That's why I'm here. So I can make recommendations.
We have bike paths on the fairway that are not safe for a family or an individual to ride on.
Right,
Why? There are enormous gutters that are like 10 to 15. I'm not exaggerating, that the
Okay.
drivers use as that the bikers have to use as an obstacle
It's-
course. And it's not family friendly the way it's built up. to
I'm
be.
hearing what you're saying, and I think it's a public works issue and not a land use issue. It's
No,
adjacent, yeah,
it's both.
right? Okay.
You can't have a bike path where it doesn't
We,
belong.
we hear you.
We have
We
it.
hear you.
It's also a
3
problem
minutes.
if you put
3
a
minutes.
playground next to a train station. No playgrounds next to train stations.
Right.
That's not safe.
Okay, who's next? Is there, sorry, would you like to speak? Yeah, this, okay. Right, right. We're, okay. Yeah.
We have 35 people.
right?
Can we find out how many from Zoom want to speak?
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna just talk to PJ for a minute.
Is there anyone in the room who has not spoken?
You-
all I did was explain.
No, that was your time. We're gonna go around first and then, yeah. Sir. Yes. Right. That's how you took your time. We're gonna try to get back to you as soon as we can. Name.
Greg Bukowski from
Okay.
Meadowbrook.
Okay.
Some of my concerns, everyone kind of expressed a lot about the
Right.
land use and how it's going to be used.
Mhm.
Mine is more about the process.
Okay,
The document is extremely vague, not just this chapter, the whole document. And this is going to be the driver, my understanding, for changes in zoning and ordinance, right? And the thought is, well, if this is vague and there's no detail, what's the process for making those changes in zoning and ordinance? And will this type of form be available when those changes come about,
right.
so that we can discuss them as well?
So your question is like, if the draft came out and it was vague.
Right.
How are we going to change that so it's clear? And we
Right,
can
so people
actually,
know
we can actually make
Specific
meaningful.
locations, specific properties,
response. Yeah.
right? Clear intentions, what's the driver for making that change
Okay.
in a particular area?
Yeah, that does touch on a couple other things, but you said it clearly.
Right.
And I think that's why the township is starting this process again.
Right. I mean, I would expect, I think everyone here would expect that there'd be detail in there that everyone would be able to identify what areas are going to get impacted by what
Mhm.
circumstances, apartments, commercial, whatever it is. As opposed to waiting till zoning gets changed and it's too late to do anything about
Right,
it.
yeah, the municipal planning code requires the municipalities to do the comprehensive plan.
Right,
And then that guides the zoning, which becomes the codes.
right.
So
But if you read the plan today, you could put any township USA.
that's why we're all
and it would
here.
like-
That's why the township's called.
Right.
Re-
And that would go to, not your problem, but the strategic plan as well. I mean, it's as vague as this, so.
Thank you. We're going to go to online, and PJ, if you can feed us some of the comments or questions.
Sure thing. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Our first question is, based on the rough draft, what is the true number for the requirement for population?
The numbers for population.
Yes, I'm guessing of where the numbers are coming from for population projections, which I think was touched on earlier.
Mike, did you hear that?
I think we say where the source of population projections. Oh, were you asking about the source of the population projections?
Were you asking about the? source?
PJ, is it the question specifically about where did the source of the population projections come from?
Just says, what is the true number for requirement for population?
Okay, well, I think what we're going to try to answer is the source of those numbers, right? And they are projected. And Mike, you can fill in anything where you want to, but the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission does projections on population growth.
Right.
And so those are the bases that the counties use.
Right, and
They've exceeded, the population has exceeded projections in the past. And so I think that they try to use those trends to make the projections. They are projections. Is that?
yes, and
We're going to come back to you. No, we're going to come back to you, Pete. We're going to keep with the process. Right. Next question online.
Sure, the next question, so the question is, they're questioning whether Section 8 does equal a rise in criminal activity. My educated guess is the lack of knowledge of who resides in Section 8 housing.
Would you repeat that, Mike? Okay.
I couldn't.
PJ, we're having trouble. It's a little fuzzy when it's coming through.
Sure, okay. Can you hear me okay, clearly now?
Try it again.
Okay. The question is, they're questioning whether or not Section 8 equals a rise in criminal activity. My educated guess is the lack of knowledge of who resides in Section 8 housing.
Right. So the question that I'm hearing is, if there's Section 8 housing, who's going to live there?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I can't answer the specifics about Section 8 housing at this time. But that we will put that down as a question, and there'll be an answer forthcoming. I'm not going to be able to answer all the questions tonight. We're going to take one from the audience. Ma'am, please come up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your name?
My name is Alicia. So I didn't know anything about this coming in tonight. Somebody just told me, Ellen told me that you were having a meeting and that there was this plan. And so I'm very grateful that you stood up and gave us everything. And I would appreciate it if,
She
because
will.
I
She will.
expected that.
We'll
I
make sure.
expected that from you guys, to be perfectly honest. I expected somebody to tell us what we were here about. And in fact, it had to be her. So I don't think that should be her 3 minutes. I think she should be allowed to speak. Yeah.
If
Okay.
I had done
So
it,
now
it
we
would have been a
understand.
little bit different.
I understand.
but
And then,
it's
okay,
good.
now here, and I do agree there are parts of the township there, the mall, there's something has to be done with the mall area. It's dying. There are vacant properties, there are property. So there does have to be a good plan, but don't we have a zoning? We have a zoning ordinance that was enacted in 2017. Am I
Right.
right about that? Is there a problem with that?
I can't answer that specifically, but what I can tell you is that in general, as the comp plans are redone and at least every 15 years, some municipalities go a little longer, it's time to revisit the zoning. Whether there's a problem or whether there's changes that would result from the new plan, usually some changes are made.
So you say a comprehensive plan is usually done once every 15 years.
Let's say that, right?
Okay, but the zoning is from 2017.
Right.
So that's not 15 years. Why are we changing zoning? I can understand doing a comp plan if that's.
I think that's probably an assumption. Maybe the zoning won't change, but if it does change, the changes will be based on the new plan, right? So
That's a circular argument. We're
not so.
changing, we have a zoning ordinance that was enacted in 2017. We did a comp plan. The comp plan might require changes to the zoning. Therefore, we're going to change the zoning, but we might not change the zoning because it was done in 2017.
Yeah.
I don't understand what the problem with the current.
It's not
zoning is.
Let me help. So the comprehensive plan, as you mentioned, there's a municipalities planning code. That is the governing document
Yes,
that the state adopts that we have to comply with.
yes.
The state says that you should be reviewing your comprehensive plan every 10 years or
Okay.
so. The comprehensive plan is the more broad overarching
Yes,
guide
yes.
for your subdivision and land development and your zoning. Zoning is comprised of the map and the text amendments.
Right.
Most of what was done in 17 was the text amendments. Think of it this way.
So you're changing the zoning map.
No, we're not changing anything. That's the point.
That's my
the
question.
Commonwealth-
Again, remember that I'm coming into this.
I understand.
blind. So
I would
I want
love-
some, so I'm hearing about circles and I'm pretty, I live close to Ardsley train station. I live close to Roslyn train station. I think I speak for most people here when I say, when I bought my house in Abington Township 30 years ago, the zoning was very important to me. I wanted to live in a single family home in a single family neighborhood. I wanted to know that I wasn't going to have an apartment complex across the street. I don't even want a house made into a duplex across the street. Renters do not have the same feeling about their neighborhoods. They're more transitory, they come and go. They don't have the same feelings that homeowners do. So we relied on the zoning and we don't want there to be the opportunity. Now, if there is there's that Messino beer distributor near Ardsley train station, I understand something has to be done with that. That's an eyesore. And if it has to be, if it turns into, but why are we talking about apartments and not more affordable homes? Because then you have taxpayers and you have people who are tied to the neighborhood. I don't know what, the only thing I can think about these apartments is that we are chasing the money under that bipartisan infrastructure bill. And we don't need that money. Abington's nice. You can just say no to that money and leave Abington the way it is. Nobody is going into the city. People are working from home. Now the cities are dying. We've learned from COVID that we can do these hybrid work. But we don't, and to be perfectly honest, people in the suburbs love their cars. We are in America. When you said you would like to be able to take the train I would not. I don't want to have to wait for a train 20 minutes and then be on their schedule. I want to hop in my car, go where I'm going. I can be home before I could even get on the train. I don't want a train. And most people feel that way. And we can walk just fine. Let's clean up the things that we have that are nice and make it more livable that way, instead of building more things that we're going to bring in more people to use the resources. I don't understand. Okay, now.
So let me say,
Now, let me just say, I only have a short period of time.
Go ahead.
You are a lovely, lovely man, and you've said wonderful things. I do not understand why we have somebody from a landscaping firm answering questions about zoning and no offense, I think you're lovely, but you did the open space in the rec, and that's great. That's right up your alley. This is not up your alley, and that's why we're getting a lot of, I can't answer that right now, because this is not your zone. Why don't we have somebody in the zone here?
If you looked at Simone Collins' resume and their total portfolio, you would see that comprehensive plans, planning, and land use is a lot of what they do.
Okay.
And when you think of landscaping, we're not talking about, somebody who comes in and designs your home. It is a large component piece of other plans.
Right.
But I want to address something because there seems to be a theme here. There seems to be this idea that because this map that the Board of Commissioners said, we hear you, stop, drew these circles, that there's some plan to build apartments where single-family residences are. That is not a conclusion that anyone has reached.
Well, no, but it's a conclusion that's on the table
It is.
because we're looking at the circles, and that's what the circles
And
mean.
that's right. That's why the circles were a problem.
Right.
That's why we put the brakes on,
Okay.
because it sent the wrong message. And that's what Mr. Collins talked about. That's why we're here. That's why we want everyone to understand that that's not the intent.
Okay.
The reason we're having these meetings is to hear what you have to say, but also to let you know we've heard you.
Okay.
And no, that's not the intent. We are not looking to put apartment buildings around every train station. That
Yeah. Well,
Pardon?
and I don't want my neighbor to be able to apply to, because, okay, my one neighbor on my street had a fire in his house, he's a contractor, he just knocked it down. It's a complete eyesore.
Mhm.
He's trying to rebuild it himself. But honestly, when I heard this, I was like, oh my gosh, he could apply to put an apartment complex up there. I don't know, because I don't want to have to worry about that.
right, I don't think you have.
Okay, but let me just
the-
say, I think
You,
if you're
you
asking,
have taken more than your 3
okay,
minutes. And
but if you're asking for ideas, here's a good idea. Just make it so that the zoning of existing single-family homes in this area cannot change. Okay, and if you do the circles or whatever, the zoning. of
That's a
the-
very,
so if-
very clear
if-
recommendation.
Whatever the zoning is of the commercial properties or the existing multi-use properties that are delinquent or falling down and needs to be, then maybe talk about like some kind of overlay district where they can be used for other purposes, but not, no.
We're not, this is not an argument. This is not an argument.
Oh,
Thank you.
make a suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay, PJ, can you give us another question, please?
Certainly. So we have another question. So this is from Commissioner Spiegelman.
Speak
He just
loudly
wanted to
so
note,
everyone can hear.
sure. So this is from Commissioner Spiegelman. He just wanted to note that for the record, there was a mischaracterization of the conversation when he asked Ms. Malone to send me the sections of the plan that were concerning her. I have not received anything thus far. So he wanted to clarify that.
Mike, are you getting it?
Yeah.
Okay, can you just say the question?
Well, no, it was a clarification from Commissioner Spiegelman. So maybe you want to repeat that so I don't get anything wrong.
Sure. So Commissioner Spiegelman says, for the record, there was a mischaracterization of our conversation. And while I asked Ms. Malone to send me the sections of the plan that were concerning her, I have not received anything thus far.
He was saying that Commissioner Spiegelman said that he has not received something.
Okay,
He has not received anything thus far. So the conversation earlier referring to a conversation with him was a mischaracterization.
Okay. I mean, that's all the. Yeah. Yeah, I think a solution here is if anyone on here or in the meeting or online has felt that they haven't been heard. These two meetings are to try to resolve that, and we're asking you to send something in writing to the township so that we can address it. Okay. If you feel that it hasn't been addressed, please send it to us again, right? We're asking. TJ, next.
Okay, we have a few more questions here. So Jim Green asks that the previously published map shows that the southwest and northwest areas of the township were far more susceptible to population overcrowding than the northeast and southeast areas. Will these inequities be resolved in future considerations?
Okay. As I hear that, the density and the development types in the township is different, let's say, west of 611 than east of 611, right? And it has something to do with the way that the soils are, the way that the streams are. Sandy Brook goes through sand, and so the development could be more dense there, and it was earlier. The residences to the east are more of the woodlands, and the streams fracture the landscape more. It couldn't be developed as densely, and it was developed later. And you'll notice in general, there's less sidewalks on the east side. There's less public parks on the east side. It was developed later at a time when people thought that the automobile was going to solve a lot of things. Whereas on the west side, the development was more around train stations and in areas that could be developed more densely, and along Easton Road. So those are functions of how people could come in and develop. What happens now is both of those areas have residential densities of different types. And what I'm starting to hear from folks is that the existing residential neighborhoods are really important to maintain in the quality and the density, right? And that the areas that are most volatile to change would likely be the commercial areas, the industrial areas, those areas where businesses change, right? And so I'm speaking now. And so how that happens may be the focus, because that may be where Abington's going to continue to grow, like every other community in the region is projected. How does it handle that? It's probably going to be through some mix of diversity in residences, right? Where do they happen? I'm hearing that people in neighborhoods, whether it's duplex neighborhoods, townhouse neighborhoods, or existing single family, want to keep that character, want to keep that density, right? That's clear. Okay. So if we start with that and then we say, well, then what are the options to accommodate growth? And how do we do it? And what's the trade-off if we go dense, right? What else are we getting is what I heard. So I think that's clear. And the circles may have triggered because they were just circles, right? And some of them subscribed commercial areas, and some of them, half of them subscribed residential areas. And it was easy to think that those circles meant that inside them was all going to be the same thing. I don't believe, from what I've read, that ever was the intent, but I do believe that I do see how people could see it that way. So I'm going to keep going around, and then we're going to come back and you'll speak and everyone else who wants to speak, because it's important. But I just wanted to frame it like that. So we are hearing that the residential is really important, the existing residential neighborhoods, to stay the way they are. PJ, do we have another Do we have another comment?
Yes, we have more questions. And there are also people with the hand raised as well.
Can you
Um,
speak a little slower because there's some fuzzies?
Sure. Yes, we have a few more questions and we also have people with their hands raised as well. So I could
Well,
go through.
Can we address the hands first? And then the questions, and then come back to the room?
He's reading them. He's reading. the
Their questions. We just
Yeah.
want to make sure that everyone is heard.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe Grace over there can unmute the people with their hands raised.
Mike Tobin, you're unmuted.
Hi, Mike Tobin, Kirkwood. I'm going to speak quick. I did put in a bunch of questions, so you can just delete them because hopefully I get them all through now. One of the original questions was about population. The population numbers in the draft, there's different numbers depending on what chapter you read. 3, 5, and 7 all state a different current population number. Therefore, if the current numbers are wrong, the forecasted how many houses we're going to need and all that, they also have to be wrong, okay? One of the women who was just up stated about trains to nowhere and things like that. In chapter 5, it states in there that our current public transportation is not robust enough to decrease the amount of cars and trucks that are on the roads today. So the plan actually confirms what she was saying. And it also states in that same statement that the environment, idling cars and trucks and buses is not good for the environment, with greenhouse gases and all that stuff. The thing that infuriates me about this plan is I think a conclusion was reached before a plan was actually developed. There's no plan, there's no discussion in there about infrastructure. There's no discussion in there about what it's going to do to the schools. And everybody knows you build all these houses, there's going to be a bunch more kids. Our schools aren't equipped. So therefore, we're going to have to do additions to the schools and all that. Our taxes are going to go through the roof to accommodate this group of people that we think may or may not be coming. And if in a township that is 98% developed and the second that most populated in the township or in Montgomery County, we're the most developed and second most in the county. Why are we so focused on putting in, and it's not only apartments, it's twin homes, it's duplexes, quadruplexes, triplexes. They could go anywhere. They could go anywhere except R1. So the most open space we have, we're not going to touch, but the more densely populated, we are going to add more density to it, which makes no sense. That's what's infuriating people about this plan. The draft plan, there's way too many questions that are not answered. The plan itself says one of the issues in there is renters are struggling to pay rent. Yet any apartments that go up, they're high-priced apartments. The apartments cost a fortune. The other thing is to increase home ownership for non-whites. I think it's like chapter 7. How is building apartments helping home ownership for non-whites? It's not. All it's doing is sucking money out of their pockets. I'm a landlord, and this whole thing is great for landlords and developers. It is not great for the citizens. Once you let this cat out of the bag, there's no going back. We're going to look like Philadelphia, and within 5 years of allowing this, Philadelphia, here we are. So that's all I got to say. I hope the commissioners are paying attention to this. So, and the woman that said she was going to run for commissioner, I hope you do, because I think we really need some no votes on this. Thank you.
Mr. Tobin, thank you. You had a lot to say about a number of chapters, and we're trying to record that all down. If you can send any written comments, it's important. Tonight, we were convening for the future land use chapter, but the things that you're saying are important, so thank you. Let's do another raised hand.
Marlene, you're unmuted.
Oh, thank you. Marlene Kessler, I live in the Crosswalk section. I have a huge list of notes and I'm going to just try to, in no particular order, get them in the 3 minutes. Please note, I've been waiting over an hour to speak, and so have other people on the Zoom. So forgive me if I sound a little agitated. Okay, first of all, this transit model is backward thinking. It's out of date right now. People are not going to work in town. Commercial real estate in Center City is dying. We don't need this. Also, those circles are a small percentage of the entire township. So only, well, some residents who work in town and care to take public transportation, that's good for them. But most of us, taxpayers, real estate owners, homeowners, it doesn't do anything for us. It's all downhill. Now, the other thing is, as one of the gentlemen said, they're building luxury apartments. Not even condos are being considered. At least they would be residents. None of this addresses affordable housing. I have something no one else has mentioned. Where are more units going to come from? We have a large population of senior citizens that are toward the end of their time wanting to live in a single family home. Those homes will open up. That it's inevitable. Let's see. I just, for my last comment, I want to tell you about my ride into town to work when I lived near Township Line and Forest Avenue. I would have to pay for my sitter for an extra half hour because it took me that long in the traffic to get to the train station. Then there was not adequate parking. Then I often missed the train because I couldn't get my money in the slot fast enough. And then I would be late for work. Coming home was even worse. To go from Wyncote train station or Jenkintown Wyncote to go to Township Line and Forest Avenue, what's that, 2-3 miles, would take me a good half hour after working a long day. I don't think any of this is wanted by anyone. It is vague. I've been told before when I mentioned the Huntington Valley Shopping Center, oh, no. That may never happen. It's in the comprehensive plan. There's a picture of that shopping center. So.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to the next person.
Karen, you're unmuted.
Hi, I'm Karen Milovich. I live probably close to Marlene. I'm in the Hollywood section, which by the way is a historic district as well, which is not being honored. We were built in 1920, as you probably know. Some of your numbers just look quite different than mine. I'm looking at the census, and 40% of our population is 40 and over at this point, as Marlene said. You're naturally, by this attrition, are going to have homes available. Also, people by the census, not by some Delaware Valley polls, are leaving Pennsylvania. We're the third highest state that has an exodus of people out of the state. And we're also the second highest state that has lost businesses. Apparently, it looks like by their census data, a third of businesses have closed or left. We have a population of 60,000. We are the 10th densest area in Pennsylvania, the 10th. We have very little employment. We only have 1,276 firms. So all these people that are coming aren't going to have a job. Philadelphia has 21,647 firms, by the way. So if you want to know where to bump up, don't bump up people, bump up employment. Our largest employer, by the way, is actually healthcare. It is our hospitals, which we are bent, if we keep this trajectory, on destroying. Our three area hospitals have 1,100 beds. And we have a potential, they have its potential of 300,000 and 400,000 people that are using those hospitals. So you are grossly understaffed as far as safe and good community medical care. And most people do work in the healthcare providers. 18% of us work in healthcare. And when you work in healthcare, a bus and a train doesn't help you. You're asked to come in at the last minute. You have odd hours. Hospitals don't close on holidays, nor do they at nights, evenings, and you get the drift. So this is your largest employer. If you don't keep a mix of private insurance with public insurance and underinsured, you're going to tank your hospital. And you know, there's hospitals that are going out of business, and this is your largest employers you're going to take down with the 3 area hospitals. Education follows it. We have 12% in education. And once your neighborhood becomes unsafe, people don't send their colleges to Penn, don't send their students to Penn State. We have very limited police officers. We're understaffed now. You should have 2 police officers for 1,000 people. So we should have 120 officers right now. And you're going to have to pump up the courts because you're going to have all these civil and criminal things that are going to go on with people living in close proximity.
Karen, thank you. I'm going to ask you, because you gave us so many figures, I'm going to ask if you write them down, and we're going to give you a place to write them down. PJ was trying to write them down as you were speaking.
Sure,
But to make sure we get them, we're going to give that at the end, and I'm going to ask the next person, please.
I didn't get a chance to summarize. I didn't even get 3 minutes.
But you did get more than three minutes. I'm going to try to get everybody to speak.
But we do not want apartments here.
Next
We
person.
live across.
Patty Ann, you're unmuted.
Hi, this is Patty Ann Lubner. I live in the Crosswick section. My concerns are the same concerns as many people here. I do not believe that we have the infrastructure to build greater density in residential. I moved to this area 20 years ago. I did not move here to be in a high density area. I have a son in the school system. I don't want to increase the student to teacher ratio. I don't want that to increase, you know, as you're talking about building these, potentially having apartment buildings built, you know, our hospital systems are already pushed, just as the person said before me. You know, what plan do you have running simultaneously that if you allow these apartment buildings to be built eventually, if you change the zoning, what's going to happen with the school systems? What's going to happen? Every concern everyone's had. I'm just against some of this building. I don't want apartment buildings. And the other thing is I've been on several of these calls, which I appreciate that we're able to join via Zoom. And I see people express their concerns. And I do appreciate that some of the things are being answered right now. However, as I said, I've been on many of these calls and people voice their concerns. And I want to know what your team does once you have these concerns. What do you do with them at that point? You know, when are they addressed as a team within your group and brought back to the community with answers?
Okay, and I'm going to answer you, and then we're going to move on. The reason why we're trying to ask people to send us information as well as take it down written form is so that we're accurate. We're going to assemble the questions, and then we're going to try to work with the township and answer them. And I think that some of the answers will help lead to the development of the future land use. I can't speak to the other chapters because people have taken this opportunity to talk about a lot of different things, right? So, but I can tell you that the team is hearing them. And so the team's going to have to go back and say, you know, how do we address the other issues that weren't chapter 13? So expect our compilation as best we can do with what we get in written form and what we've taken down as questions, and then try to answer them.
Okay,
All right?
thank you.
Thank you, Patty Ann.
Thank you.
Next,
Ross, you're unmuted.
okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, Ross.
Awesome. Hi, Ross Abel. I live near Noble Station, the Noble Village area. I've listened in on a lot of the comprehensive plan meetings thus far, and being a parent of little ones myself, I really appreciate the focus on fostering environments with a safe pedestrian and bike experience. This benefits not only kids, but also the elderly and disabled using assistive devices like folks at Rydell Park, who have explicitly expressed to the township that they need safe walkable environments to stay active and healthy. So I appreciate those aspects of the land use draft chapter I looked at thus far. Our family moved to the area near Noble because it had sidewalks, access to the train to Philadelphia, and is walkable and bikeable to things like groceries, coffee, shopping, the pharmacy, etc. And in response to some of the previous commenters, we do have several neighbors who work in the city and regularly use the train to get to work, including our commissioner, Stuart Weingrad. The Noble TOD plan has a proposal for creating green space, and whether or not it's adjacent to the actual train station, which was noted by one of the previous speakers. I know myself and many families would love to see green space happen when there's not much accessible for us. So if we could put developers on the hook to provide great community benefits like this or sidewalks, that would be great. I also wanted to note on density that in my view, our best walkable, vibrant areas are places like Keswick and Glenside and Jenkintown. And they historically had a great mix of different housing types like twins, rows, mixed use. And so it's not that our township entirely has only single family detached housing. It does have a good mixture, especially around the train station. So it's not foreign. And I think when we talk about the TOD areas around the stations, that's not in much of the Meadowbrook area and places where things are spaced out a lot more. And I do agree with Chris's notion of ensuring there's great accountability structure for us to fulfill the purposes we're intending for these spaces. But I think that's all I had on my list. Thank you.
Ross, did we lose you?
Oh, I'm still here. I just said that was it for my list.
Okay.
He's done. Okay, done. Thank you. Next, please.
Kathleen, you're unmuted.
Yeah, hi.
Kathleen.
My name is Kathleen Green and I am from Abington around Target area in the Brentwood section. And I'm just concerned because I heard that you mentioned Section 8 and I wanted to see if that was the same Section 8 that they used in Philadelphia years ago that changed the landscape of Northeast Philadelphia.
Mhm. Okay, so Kathleen, somebody mentioned Section 8. I'm not able to speak to that yet. Mike, I don't know if it was addressed in the plan at all or if it came up from the audience. Okay, so
That's the audience.
the idea of Section 8 housing came up from the audience tonight. Mike helped create the draft and says that it's not addressed in the draft. And we'll confirm that. Okay.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry, it's not in the draft?
It's not in the draft. It did come up from the audience.
Okay,
tonight.
because
That's how
I
it-
don't want
That's how it
anything.
started in this conversation tonight.
Yeah, I didn't want anything like that. If it's Section 7 or how they're disguising it as low income housing.
Yes,
I'm
I
just-
hear what you're saying, and
Okay.
it'll go down as a question and we'll have an answer to it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
We have one more or two
Yes.
more?
This Karen already spoke.
Okay.
Hamam.
Karen spoke already.
Hamam, you're
Oh,
unmuted.
Haman?
Hello, can folks hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Hi.
thank you. Sorry, I had in a previous meeting, I had problems with my
with my microphone. My name's Hammam Alduri. I live at Noble. And I just wanted, I guess I have a statement that turns into a
Noble?
question. And it's to do with some of the my fellow residents' concern about density as a kind of category that gives sense to urban development. I'm frankly for urban development if it makes sense. I'm also for changing zoning if it makes sense. But I do want to just say that since at least 2002 and 2003, there has been a vast body of literature of scholarly work and research on the issue of density and urban development. And the literature shows overwhelmingly that the concerns, especially the congestion effects on density, are actually a myth. Things like the pressure that density would put on things like schooling, on traffic and things like that. It actually, the literature shows, and there's a very good article from 2019, if I'm not mistaken, that was composed and written by the Brookings Institute that takes the reader through lots of positive things about what is called or what is known as gentle density, a kind of slow development of the urban environment in suburban neighborhoods like Abington. So I would, my question is, do the commissioners and other people working on this comprehensive plan intend to include a kind of education piece that slowly takes residents through some of the questions and concerns that they have around hot topic issues like school, how, for example, density would affect things like schooling, because the literature, the planners, social scientists, etc., it overwhelmingly shows that density is actually not a negative issue. If you think, for example, about how density deals with house pricing, it doesn't actually lower the value of your home. If anything, the value of your home either stays the same or goes up. And there are lots of other benefits that go with education and livability. So I would like to see something that would provide a kind of deeper education to residents around this issue of density, but also more broadly urban development, because I think it's incredibly important. Thank you.
Hammam, thank you. And what I think you're saying, and I'm going to ask Mike to confirm this, is that there are studies out there that say increasing density may not have the impacts that are feared, and I'm thinking that if that's true, it's very specific to how it's done and all the details.
Yes,
and Mike, would you add to that?
Sure. And one of the comments that Hammam made was about the impact on schools and how it's often not as bad of an impact or such an impact as many people think, because the number of school children per unit is much, much lower than for single family detached. He also talked about impact on traffic, and you touched on that. And that can vary, I think. I don't have the statistics on that with me to speak to that, but it can definitely vary based on whether there are multimodal options, walking options, the train, and then the peak hours of demand when people are driving. Are they driving to work? Are they driving to coming home to from work after the end of the day? Are they going out for lunch? Things like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've gotten everyone. I would like to, Laura, may I call you Laura? All right, you've been patient, please. We're going to start the second round. And no, I'm not.
710C1 of the Sunshine Law. So thank you. The only thing I want to say is I think Alicia said it the best. Don't touch our zoning. Don't touch our zoning. So the other thing I want to say is there's another way in here to touch our zoning that nobody knows. So there's, when you draw a circle around the train and you say, well, we're going to let this go into duplexes and triplexes, we all understand that. But what we don't understand is when they have a picture of an apartment building on the Huntington Valley Shopping Center and they leave that there, that's their vision. That's in this comprehensive plan, which is their vision. When something is their vision, spot zoning protections, according to case law, are no longer quite so valid. Okay, so spot zoning is you can't give one person a right that's different than somebody else. Okay, so text and map amendments are used to do things like the Wawa in Jenkintown that wanted 24 variances, couldn't get them, didn't have a single hardship. And so they went around the back door and they said, we would like you commissioners to change the law for us. You're allowed to make the zoning laws in the township. But when you make the zoning laws, you can't make a different law for just one person. It has to be for everybody in the township who has the same kind of property. So when you have a parking lot on a shopping center and you have a big apartment building sitting there, as long as everybody who has the same parameters when they come in, Preet's ordinance was not for one apartment building. It had a master plan in there. Nobody read it. I think I'm the only one who read it. Had a master plan in there to talk about how one building had to agree with the other buildings. And if one building didn't want to be part of the master plan, they could opt out. And yet you all got the history of shopping and a presentation showing one building. By persisting, we got them finally to show two, one on the Macy's lot. But where the most could go was over on Mr. Goodman's properties on the other side of the mall. And they absolutely refused to show them. When the Wawa went in and they got that right to build the gas station, there are other properties in the township that have that right and they refused to show them. When the YMCA was rezoned, there are other properties like Meadowbrook Apartments, we believe, who got that right, but they refused to show them. This is really important because in this vision, if you leave things in this vision that they say, oh, no, we're not rezoning, don't worry about it. Okay, that's how they rezone. The text and map amendment comes in. Mr. Manfredi has promised you, he even made his committee, the Comprehensive Plan Consistency Committee. And they will approve the text and map amendments that come in. So whatever is in that vision is important for you to know. And yes, the 2017 zoning did happen, and we haven't even begun to see the exacerbated development from that because it's only a few years out. Okay, people are just buying properties and learning how that's to be used now. And the other thing I wanted to say is just that one meeting is not enough after this. I mean, clearly we didn't figure out what the zoning was going to be for the whole township tonight. So when Mr. Collins, who does a very nice job, the parks thing was very nicely done, when he puts this together to say that, and I understood this, tell me if I'm wrong, that you're going to come back, show us what you did, and then it's going to move on. I hope that's not the case. I hope you come back, show us what you did, and then we have a reference point to talk about from there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And if there's anybody else who would like to speak, we're going to take 2 or 3 more people. So if you haven't spoken yet, or if you have, sir. Floor.
Well, I'm back. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that input. That's very valuable. Some things that haven't been mentioned that I think are really important. Land use pop-up on page 22. Abington will utilize pop-up projects to introduce and test land use concepts and activate public spaces, outdoor dining, a parklet, street festivals. You are opening Pandora's box. You will get crowds, they will be unruly, the looting, the theft, the vandalism. Why do I know this? I lived in Philadelphia all my life before Abington. That's exactly what happened. You do not want this pop-up zoning.
Yeah.
Believe me. To answer something that somebody said before about section 8, no, it's not in the plan per se, but it's the inevitable result of what the developers will do. Something that hasn't been mentioned or maybe tangentially, Abington Hospital serves 50,000 plus people in Abington, also the surrounding areas. All this so-called new development will strain already insufficient medical services, be exacerbated, which is exacerbated by a shortage of other medical facilities. And when this young lady said about only one more meeting, I specifically wrote that down. We can't just have a meeting in June and say, all good, we have a plan now. No, this has to be the beginning of a much longer process. When I was working for my previous employer, a plan of this scope would have taken much longer than a month, probably much longer than a year. On a personal note, my wife and I moved here last year. And one of the reasons we moved here was because of what you had said about the neighborhoods, about the quiet, the peace, the serenity, the nice feel. This plan will destroy it. Thank you.
Sir, 1, 2. Okay.
I have a question.
Sure. And then this gentleman, and then one other person.
Amy Haviland. This wasn't mentioned, but with here like section 8 and these special, what was it, exceptions or whatever for developers, whatever, but the equitable housing plan. And that's my knowledge of it, the little bit that I know. It's something that the Biden administration is pushing. Equitable housing plan. I know it's equitable housing. I believe it's plan. And the idea is like municipalities and everything, they'll get federal funding if they follow certain guidelines with equitable housing. And it just sounds like, you know, with all of these developments going up and they're expensive, you take, for instance, I guess it's considered Upper Moreland, but that big thing they put at the corner of York Road and Davisville, they're expensive. You know, I mean, I know that much. And I've, you know, and there again, this is hearsay, but I've heard, oh, there's section 8 people in there, whatever. But there again, section 8 was mentioned again tonight. So my question is, how much of this has to do with the equitable housing plan that is tied to federal funding? Because the one thing that I did read about it was that if you don't really follow these guidelines, your federal funding might be held back. To my understanding, just a question, how tied to all of this? How much is tied to the equitable housing plan?
So I'm not sure we can answer that. But federal funding there's all kinds of federal funding, right? And so, Mike, I would just ask you if there was any reference to that in the draft.
No, I mean, there were no proposals in the plan for obtaining funding for promoting acquisition or construction of new homes, nothing like that, no.
Would those types of funding requests come from individual developers?
Yes. And for one example would be like low income housing tax credits.
And the township has discretion about what it would like to see, right? So it's important to describe that in the future land use.
Sure, and that's affected by the zoning, which is affected by the future land use.
So that's the beginning of an answer. Okay. Sorry. 10 questions, so is that what that is?
Just checking to make sure I have all my ideas in my hands. This is maybe, I apologize if I diverge a little bit. People have talked a little bit about Section 8 housing, about low-income housing, about renters. I own my house now. Peg is gone. I guess Peg is gone. I actually have my house is actually older than hers. Built in the 1890s. We own our house now, my wife and I. I've lived in Section 8 housing. I have friends who live in Section 8 housing. I have friends who live in low-income housing. I own my house now, but I rented my home for a very long time. I understand the skepticism that many people have and the anxiety that many people have, but we are not criminals.
No.
We're not bad people. We're not substandard citizens. Excuse me. This is my 3 minutes. We're not substandard citizens. We do not care less about our homes or our community than people who own their houses. My experience with people who have been transient in their communities is often that we don't have the choice to be permanent residents. We leave because the rents go up and we have to, not because we want to move. I think it's hard to understand the value of something like Section 8 if you have not personally stared down the barrel of homelessness with your own family. I hope that for whatever anxiety that we may as a community experience about the possibility of development, folks can remain compassionate for people who need that kind of housing and who are no less committed to their communities than homeowners who have lived here for 30 years.
I don't think this is about, what we have here in Abington, it's not that we are not accepting, is I feel like you're walking away with. But I grew up in Linwood Gardens in Cheltenham, and when I say grow up, I was born there and I was there until way past 21. And it was not a good living situation. And we do have a lot of apartments here in Abington that are run by basically, I guess you would call them real estate developers or people who work for real estate developers, and they're living in slum conditions. And some people are paying high rent, some people are paying maybe an adjusted scale. But what we have in Abington is a lot of apartments that aren't livable, and they're not doing what they should to protect those people. And they're looking to bring in more large scale apartments when they're not protecting the people we have who are already living in poor apartments, and there are a lot of them. I am hearing about so many of them, it's unbelievable. And that's the problem we have. Apartments that are not livable. And I grew up in one, it wasn't livable. And I don't see the commissioners really doing anything about 100 York and others. It's a tragedy because it's really awful when you wake up and the hot water's not working and you're paying rent or you're paying adjusted rent. And the people who I think believe are our commissioners don't understand that. But what we're bringing in, I believe, is not going to be good housing. That's why I'm talking about Raymore and Flanagan. They're building on where rats are. Raymore and Flanagan, that whole area is filled with rats. That area is not safe. They've had two really that were in the news, road rage incidents, and then they're talking about putting, and they already have labeled it a bike lane. A bike lane there is not safe. And the playground with the train station next to it, that's not safe. Anyone would tell you that as a parent of not necessarily, you might be able to watch your 5- and 6-year-old away from the train. But when you have a 12 or 13-year-old who's looking for something to do, and this is private property and that's private property, and they're building these big buildings where there's no playground, and they're relying on taxpayers and the public to pay for it, and then there's no decent sidewalks around, and they don't even get the businesses here to take care of their sidewalks. And they're not doing anything to improve that. And we're just gonna be building houses that are unlivable. Unlivable is what we're getting. And I think diversity is great. I love diversity. I think most everyone does. But the thing we're getting here is as the wealthy choose to leave because of what's happening here, this township doesn't listen to the public, doesn't listen to the residents, doesn't listen to the visitors. They do what they want. And they're actually more interested in bringing in developers.
We're gonna end it there. Thank you. This is really good. I learned a lot. I hope everyone else learned something from your neighbors, and I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Manfredi to give you some information.
Thank you, Bill. And more importantly, thank you all for coming. We truly appreciate it. We truly appreciate your attendance. We are here to listen. This is part of the process. We've heard a few times tonight that plan is finished. The only thing that has been concluded is the work of the comprehensive plan development team. This is the first step, as I mentioned earlier, in the public input process for the Board of Commissioners to hear what you want. The meeting that is scheduled for June 15th isn't planned to be the last session. And even if it's the second or perhaps last, which I don't believe it will be, information session like this, the Board of Commissioners meetings have not even begun. There are many other meetings that will occur as this plan is developed and finalized and goes before the Board of Commissioners. So, and I apologize, I forgot your last name. Is it George? I forgot your last name. I apologize for calling you by your first name. It does take a long time to develop a plan like this, and the plan has been worked on for some time. A lot of work by a lot of citizen volunteers have done that. And the board recognizes how important public input is, which is why we're here. So I want to say thank you. And let me just tell you, anyone who wants to communicate with me directly or through my assistant can, but we also have a page that is www.abingtonpa.gov/vision 2035. There's a button, tell us about your vision, where you can fill out that form and send it in, and we will take that information, give it to the planning team so they can develop your vision in addition to the comments and questions that you have. And you can also send to, and I want to make sure I tell you correctly because we have a number of these, public comment at abingtonpa.gov. So you have the form on the Vision 20. And keep in mind, that page has all the documents, and there are many documents that I think are out there that people may not realize are there that do talk to the work that the citizen volunteers on the comp plan development team put into this plan to this point. So publiccommentpa.gov, as well as the Vision 2035 page of the website. And you will see all the, there's a plethora of information about this plan. So with that, again, thank you so very much. Hopefully we'll see you again. Have a good evening.